The first ship did not arrive with weapons. It arrived with silence. No alarms rang across Earth's defenses. No satellites blinked warnings. The object slipped through the outer layers of human detection like a ghost refusing to be seen. It appeared in orbit, massive and fractured, a drifting graveyard of metal and light. At first, astronomers thought it was debris. Then they realized the debris was moving with purpose. Within hours, every major government on Earth knew something was wrong. Within minutes after that, humanity understood something far worse. The vessel was not a warship. It was a refugee. The transmission came as a whisper, faint and broken, like a dying breath carried across the void. We seek sanctuary. We have nowhere else to go. For a long time, no one answered. Because the translation systems were still struggling, still decoding, still trying to comprehend the layered mathematics embedded within the message. But even before the words became clear, the emotion behind them was unmistakable. Desperation, fear, and something deeper, extinction. By the time the message was fully understood, the ship had begun to fall. Not crashing, not attacking, just falling. Systems failing. Structure collapsing. It drifted closer to Earth like a wounded animal no longer able to fight gravity. Humanity had a choice to make. And it had very little time. In Geneva, the Emergency Council convened faster than any meeting in human history. Leaders argued, voices rising, accusations flying, strategies clashing. Some demanded immediate defense protocols. Others called for caution. A few argued for silence, suggesting they should not respond at all. "We don't know what this is," one general said. "It could be a trap." "It's not a trap," a scientist replied. "Nothing that broken could be a trap." "How do you know?" "I don't. But I know suffering when I see it." Images from telescopes filled the room. The alien ship was not just damaged. It was ruined. Entire sections had been torn open as if ripped apart by something unimaginably powerful. Strange organic structures fused with metallic frameworks pulsed weakly, like a dying heart. Escape pods drifted around it, most of them shattered. And then someone zoomed in. Inside the fractured hull, movement. Not machines, not weapons. People. Alien, yes. Unknown, yes. But undeniably alive. Or trying to be. That was the moment the room fell silent. Because no one could deny it anymore. This was not an invasion. This was a fleeing civilization. The debate ended with a single question. What kind of species do we want to be? The answer came from an unexpected voice. A representative from a nation that had once been torn apart by war, rebuilt by fragile cooperation, and held together by the memory of suffering. "We know what it means to have nowhere to go," she said quietly. "We know what it means to beg for help and be ignored." She looked around the room. Let's not be the ones who ignore them. The decision was made. Humanity would answer. The first response was simple. "You are welcome here." The reaction from the alien ship was immediate. Energy spikes flickered across its surface, weak but unmistakable. The drifting wreck stabilized slightly, as if hope itself had given it strength. But hope would not be enough. The ship was dying, and so were the people inside it. Operation Lifeline began within the hour. Every available resource was mobilized. Space agencies coordinated launches at a scale never attempted before. Military vessels were repurposed as rescue platforms. Civilian industries redirected production toward emergency supplies. For the first time in history, humanity moved as one. Not perfectly, not without conflict, but with a shared purpose strong enough to overcome hesitation. Save them. The first human crew to reach the alien vessel expected fear. They expected hostility. They expected chaos. What they found was something far worse. Silence. Inside the ship, the air was thin and cold. The corridors were dim, lit only by flickering bioluminescent veins running along the walls. The architecture was unlike anything humans had seen, curved and flowing, as if grown rather than built. And everywhere, there were bodies. Not dead, not yet, but close. The aliens were smaller than humans, their forms delicate, almost fragile. The skin shimmered faintly, shifting colors in response to their condition. Most lay still, too weak to move, their breathing shallow. When the first humans stepped forward, one of them looked up. Their eyes were large, luminous, filled with something that transcended language. Fear, hope, and disbelief. The human removed their helmet. It was not protocol. It was not safe. But in that moment, it was necessary. "We're here to help," he said. The alien did not understand the words. But it understood the gesture. And slowly, weakly, it reached out. The rescue began. It quickly became clear that this was not a simple evacuation. The aliens were suffering from multiple system failures, both biological and technological. Their ship had sustained damage far beyond repair. And yet, somehow, they had survived long enough to reach Earth. How? One engineer asked, staring at the data. The answer came from the ship itself. Deep within its core, a system still functioned. A network of energy pathways, burned and strained, but active. It had redirected power from every non-essential system to life support. It had sacrificed everything else to keep its people alive. It chose them, the engineer whispered. The realization spread quickly. This was not just a ship. It was a guardian, and it had done everything it could. Now it was humanity's turn. Days turned into weeks. The rescue operation expanded into something unprecedented. Massive facilities were constructed to house the refugees. Medical teams worked around the clock to understand alien biology, developing treatments through trial and error. There were setbacks. There were losses. But there were also victories. The first alien to fully recover became a symbol. It stood before a group of human doctors, its form steadier, its colors brighter. Through a translator, it spoke. "We did not expect kindness," it said. The room was quiet. "We did not expect survival." One of the doctors smiled. "Neither did we," she replied. The alien tilted its head. "You are not afraid of us." "Oh, we're terrified," she said honestly. "But that's never stopped us before." The alien considered this. "Then you are brave." The doctor shook her head. "No," she said. "We're human." As more refugees recovered, their story began to unfold. They called themselves the Lethari. Their home had once been a thriving world, rich with life and culture. They had explored the galaxy, formed alliances, built wonders. And then it came. Not a species, not a fleet, something else. They struggled to describe it. Their language faltered when trying to define the entity that had destroyed them. It was vast, ancient, and incomprehensible. It did not conquer. It consumed. Worlds vanished in its path, reduced to nothingness. Stars dimmed. Entire systems went dark. The Lethari had tried to fight. They had failed. They had tried to flee. Most had not made it. The ship that reached Earth was one of the last. "Where is it now?" a human officer asked. The Lethari representative hesitated. "Coming," it said. The words sent a chill through every room it was spoken in. Humanity had taken in refugees. Now it faced a choice again. Prepare, or pretend it would not arrive. This time, the debate was shorter. Because humanity had already seen what running looked like. And it had decided it would not run. The preparations began in secret at first. Then, inevitably, they became public. Weapons were developed at a pace never seen before. Technologies once considered theoretical were pushed into reality. Energy systems, propulsion methods, defensive arrays, all advanced in leaps and bounds. But humanity did not do it alone. The Lethari, once they regained strength, offered their knowledge, their science, their history, their understanding of the entity. It was not enough, but it was a start. "What if we can't stop it?" someone asked. The answer came from a human engineer. "Then we slow it down. And if we can't do that, then we make it pay for every inch." The tone was not hopeful. It was determined. Months passed, then a year. The sky remained unchanged, but the sensors told a different story. Something was approaching. At first, it was just a distortion, a ripple in the fabric of space. Then it grew, expanding, warping everything around it. Telescopes struggled to focus on it. Instruments failed to interpret it. It was as if reality itself rejected its presence. But one thing was clear. It was massive, larger than anything humanity had ever encountered, larger than anything the Lethari had ever imagined. It's here, someone whispered. The world held its breath. The first contact was not an attack. It was an absence. A region of space simply ceased to exist. Satellites disappeared. Signals vanished. And then the edge of the distortion reached the outer defenses. Humanity responded, not with panic, but with fire. Every weapon, every system, every piece of technology they had built was unleashed. Beams of energy lanced across space. Projectiles moved at relativistic speeds. Experimental devices bent the laws of physics in desperate attempts to disrupt the entity. For a moment, it seemed to work. The distortion slowed, shifted, reacted, hope surged, then it adapted. The attacks were absorbed, redirected, nullified. The entity continued its advance, unaffected. But something had changed. It was no longer ignoring them. It was paying attention. And that was enough. Keep firing. The command came. Humanity did not stop. They knew they could not win. But they also knew something the entity did not. Humans did not fight to win. They fought to survive. And sometimes, that was enough. The battle stretched on. Losses mounted. But the entity slowed. Not by much, but enough. Enough for something else to happen. Deep within Earth's atmosphere, a final project reached completion. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a message, a signal, a declaration. When it activated, it did not fire at the entity. It reached out, across space, across time, across whatever boundaries the universe held. The message was simple. We are here. The entity paused. For the first time since its arrival, it stopped moving. The distortion stabilized, its chaotic edges settling into something almost focused. It was listening. Humanity had no idea if it could understand. But they spoke anyway. We don't know what you are, the message continued. We don't know why you do this. There was no response. But these people, the message said, they matter. Images followed, of the Lethari, of their world, of their lives, of their suffering, of their survival. They are not nothing. The entity shifted. A ripple passed through it, like a thought forming. And neither are we. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, the distortion began to recede. Not retreating, not fleeing, but withdrawing. Space returned. Stars reappeared. The entity moved away from Earth. No one spoke. No one moved. They watched as it faded into the distance, its presence diminishing until it was gone. The senses confirmed it. The threat was over. For now. Cheers erupted across the planet. Relief flooded every corner of human civilization. They had done it. They had survived. Not by destroying the enemy, but by being seen. In the aftermath, the question remained. Why? Why had it stopped? The Lethari had no answer. Humanity had only a theory. Maybe it had never encountered resistance like this before. Maybe it had never encountered communication. Or maybe, just maybe, it had never encountered a species willing to stand between it and its prey. Whatever the reason, it had chosen to leave. And that was enough. The Lethari did not leave Earth. Not immediately. They stayed, rebuilding, recovering, learning. And humanity learned from them. Cultures blended. Knowledge grew. A new chapter began. One built not on conquest or fear, but on something far more fragile. Trust. Years later, a child stood beneath the night sky, looking up at the stars. Is it gone? They asked. The adult beside them smiled. We don't know, they said. Will it come back? Maybe. The child was quiet for a moment. Then what will we do? The adult looked up at the stars, remembering the day everything had nearly ended. And the day humanity chose to stand. We'll be ready, they said. Not with fear, not with hatred, but with the same thing that had saved them before. A refusal to let the universe decide who mattered. Because when the galaxy came to Earth, broken and afraid, humanity did not turn away. And when the end came looking for them, humanity did not kneel. They stood, and the universe, for the first time, listened. The silence did not last. It never does. For a while, humanity believed the worst had passed. The skies were calm again. Trade resumed. Cities expanded. The presence of the Lethari became something ordinary, something almost comforting. The glowing forms moved through human streets, their voices blending into the rhythm of Earth's growing unity. History recorded the day the entity withdrew as a victory. But history has a habit of ending chapters too early, because something else had been listening, far beyond the edges of human detection, in regions of space where light itself struggled to exist. A signal echoed. We are here. Humanity had meant it as a declaration. The universe heard it as an invitation. The first anomaly appeared 2 years after the entity's retreat. It was small, barely noticeable. A research station orbiting the outer edges of the solar system reported a fluctuation in background radiation. A brief spike, then nothing. They logged it as interference. A day later, the station went silent. No distress signal, no warning, just gone. When a probe was sent to investigate, it found nothing. No debris, no wreckage, not even a trace of energy discharge. Just empty space where something had once existed. At first, it was dismissed as a malfunction, a data error, an unfortunate accident. But then it happened again. And again. Small outposts, unmanned probes, isolated satellites, all disappearing without explanation. Humanity noticed the pattern before it could deny it. Something was taking pieces of them. And it was doing so carefully, quietly, as if testing. The Lethari were the first to understand the danger. This is not the same, their representatives said during an emergency council session. The entity we fled, it consumed everything. It did not hide. Then what is this? A human commander asked. The Lethari hesitated. We do not know, they admitted. And that is worse, because the unknown does not follow rules. The unknown does not hesitate. And the unknown does not announce itself. Humanity responded the only way it knew how. They watched. Every sensor was recalibrated. Every telescope reoriented. Deep space monitoring expanded beyond previous limits. Detection systems grew more sensitive, more precise, more desperate to find something that refused to be seen. Weeks passed without incident. Then a signal came through. Not from the outer system. Not from deep space. From Earth. It originated in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, from a research platform studying deep-sea anomalies. The message was fragmented, distorted, barely coherent. But it was enough. Not alone. It's here. It's inside. The transmission cut off mid-sentence. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately. What they found was wrong. The platform was intact. No signs of damage. No structural failure. No evidence of attack. But it was empty. Every crew member was gone. Not a single trace of struggle remained. Equipment was still running. Data logs continued to record environmental conditions. Personal items were left exactly where they had been. It was as if the people had simply ceased to exist. Except for one thing. A single recording, buried deep within the system logs, partially corrupted but recoverable. The footage showed a scientist, her face pale, her hands shaking as she spoke directly into the camera. We thought it was a signal, she said. Something beneath us. Something alive. Behind her, alarms flickered silently. It started with the water, she continued. Changes in density. Movement that didn't make sense. Then the reflections. Her voice broke. They're not reflections. The camera shifted, just slightly, catching a glimpse of the ocean outside the platform's observation window. For a brief moment, the surface of the water moved in a way that defied physics. Not waves, not currents, something else, something watching back. It sees us, the scientist whispered. It's learning. The lights behind her flickered, then went out. The recording ended. The room was silent as the footage finished playing. No one spoke, because no one knew what to say. The threat had changed. It was no longer distant. It was here. And it was not alone. The first confirmed encounter happened 3 days later. A cargo vessel traveling between Earth and Mars reported an anomaly in its internal systems. Doors opening without command. Lights dimming in isolated sections. Temperature fluctuations in sealed compartments. At first, the crew believed it was a technical malfunction. Then one of them disappeared. The logs showed him entering a maintenance corridor. And never coming out. Security teams searched the ship. They found nothing. Until they reached the corridor. The walls were intact. The floor was undisturbed. But the space itself felt wrong. One of the crew described it later as too quiet. As if sound itself had been removed. And then they saw it. A distortion, not visible in the traditional sense. More like a gap in perception. A place where reality seemed to bend inward, folding into itself. It moved, not quickly, not aggressively, but with intention. One of the crew raised a weapon. Another tried to speak. Neither had time to finish. The distortion expanded, just for a second, and they were gone. The remaining crew did not hesitate. They sealed the corridor. Then they sealed the entire section. Then they abandoned the ship. The vessel was later recovered by a remote drone. The sealed section was still intact. But the distortion was gone. Whatever it was, it had left. Or moved. Humanity now had a problem it could not ignore. An invisible threat. One that did not attack openly. One that did not follow patterns. One that seemed to choose its targets with precision. And worst of all, one that was learning. The Lethari were afraid. More afraid than they had ever been. This is how it begins, their representative said. Not with destruction. With understanding. What do you mean? A human scientist asked. The Lethari's colors dimmed. The entity we fled. It did not start as a force of annihilation. It evolved. It learned. It adapted to every resistance it encountered. A heavy silence filled the room. You think this is the same thing? Someone asked. No. The Lethari said. We think this is something else. Something worse. The Lethari did not answer. Because they did not need to. Humanity had already reached the same conclusion. If the first entity was destruction without thought, this was thought without mercy. And it had chosen to begin here. The response was immediate. Containment protocols were established across Earth and its colonies. Travel restrictions were implemented. Every ship, every station, every facility underwent constant monitoring. But containment only works when you know what you're containing. And they didn't. The disappearances continued. Small at first, then larger. A mining colony on the moon lost contact with its central hub. When a team arrived, they found the same pattern. No damage, no bodies, no explanation, just absence. The term, vanishing zones, entered human vocabulary. Areas where reality itself seemed unstable. Areas where people simply stopped existing. Panic began to spread. Not openly, not yet, but beneath the surface, fear grew. Because this was not a threat you could fight. Not directly. You couldn't shoot it. You couldn't outrun it. You couldn't even see it. And that terrified humanity more than anything before. So they did what they always do when faced with the impossible. They tried to understand it. Research teams worked around the clock, analyzing every piece of data, every recording, every anomaly. Patterns began to emerge, faint and incomplete, but enough to form a hypothesis. The distortions were not random. They were connected. Each disappearance created a subtle change in the surrounding space. A shift in energy, in structure, in something deeper than physics could currently explain. It was as if something was weaving itself into reality. Thread by thread, piece by piece. And humanity was the material. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A Lethari child. It had been observing the data, watching the simulations, listening to the discussions with a curiosity that only the young possess. It's not taking, the child said. The room paused. What do you mean? A researcher asked. The child pointed to the display. It's not taking them away, it said. It's making space for them. Confusion filled the room. That doesn't make sense, someone said. The child tilted its head. It does if you think like it. And that was the moment everything changed. Because humanity had been asking the wrong question. They had been asking, where are the missing going? The real question was, what are they becoming? The answer was not comforting. The distortions were not just consuming matter. They were incorporating it. Every person, every object, every piece of data absorbed into the anomaly became part of it. A growing structure, a growing intelligence, a growing presence. It was not destroying reality. It was rewriting it, and it was using humanity to do it. The implications were staggering. If left unchecked, the entire planet could become part of this thing. Not destroyed, not erased, but transformed into something unrecognizable. Something that would no longer be human, or Lethari, or anything that had ever existed before. The decision that followed was the hardest humanity had ever faced. Because this was not an enemy they could defeat, not in the traditional sense. But they could stop it. At a cost. A plan was formed, not to destroy the anomaly, but to isolate it, to contain it within a controlled space, to trap it before it could grow any further. The location was chosen carefully. A region of space far from Earth, far from any inhabited system. A place where the damage could be limited. The method was experimental, based on theories that had never been tested at this scale. It would involve creating a localized collapse in space-time, a pocket where the anomaly could be sealed forever. If it worked, if it failed, no one wanted to consider that possibility. The operation required a lure, something to draw the anomaly into the containment zone, something it would not ignore. The answer was obvious: humanity. A single ship was prepared, equipped with the necessary technology to trigger the containment field, staffed by volunteers, people who understood what they were facing, and chose to face it anyway. The Lethari offered to help, but the humans refused. This is our responsibility, the mission commander said. It chose us. The Lethari representative looked at them for a long moment. You do not have to do this alone, it said. The commander smiled. We're not alone, he replied. We have you. That's why this is worth doing. The ship launched in silence. No fanfare, no celebration, just a quiet departure into the unknown. The anomaly responded immediately, as if it had been waiting. Distortions appeared along the ship's path, growing more frequent, more intense. The crew watched as reality itself began to bend around them, the edges of their perception blurring, shifting. It's following, one of them said. Good, the commander replied. That's the plan. The journey was short, but it felt like an eternity. Because with every passing moment, the anomaly grew closer, stronger, more aware. By the time they reached the designated location, it was no longer subtle. The distortion filled the surrounding space, a vast, shifting presence that defied description. It was no longer hiding. It had no reason to. The ship came to a stop. The crew prepared for the final sequence. Containment field ready, the engineer said. Activation on your command. The commander took a deep breath. He looked at the faces around him. Some calm, some afraid, all determined. Any regrets? He asked. A quiet laugh spread through the crew. Only that we won't get to see how it ends, someone said. The commander nodded. Yeah, he said. Me too. He turned back to the controls. Activate. The field ignited. Space itself seemed to fold inward, collapsing around the anomaly. The distortions reacted instantly, surging toward the ship, drawn by the sudden change. It's accelerating, the navigator shouted. Hold the field, the commander ordered. The ship shook as the anomaly pressed against it, reality warping under the strain. Systems flickered, alarms blared, field stability at 60%, 50, 40. The anomaly was adapting, just like before, but this time, humanity was ready. Engage secondary sequence, the commander said. The final phase began. A cascade of energy erupted from the ship, feeding into the containment field, reinforcing it, stabilizing it just enough. But it came at a cost. Core integrity failing. The engineer shouted. We won't hold this. The commander watched the readings. They were out of time. Then we finish it, he said. He opened a channel to Earth. This is it, he said. If you're going to do anything, do it now. On Earth, the response was immediate. The final component of the plan activated. A network of satellites, positioned across the system, synchronized their output, channeling an immense surge of energy toward the containment zone. The field surged. The anomaly recoiled. For a moment, it resisted. Then the collapse completed. Space folded in on itself, sealing the anomaly within a pocket of its own creation. The distortion vanished. The field stabilized. The threat was contained. The ship was gone. Back on Earth, the confirmation came through. The anomaly was no longer present. The vanishing zones disappeared. The distortions ceased. The threat had been stopped. At least for now. There was no celebration. Not this time. Because the cost was too high. Names were remembered. Faces were honored. And humanity moved forward. Again. Because that is what they do. They endure. They adapt. They stand. Even when the universe itself begins to unravel. Even when the enemy cannot be seen. Even when the cost is everything. Years later, the stars still shone. Earth still thrived. The Lethari still walked among humans. But something had changed. Not in the sky. Not in the stars. But in humanity. Because they now knew something they had never truly understood before. The universe was not empty. It was not silent. It was watching, learning, growing, and somewhere, beyond the edges of known space, something remembered. The signal, the resistance, the defiance, and it was not afraid. It was curious. The next time it came, it would not come quietly, and humanity would be waiting. The stars began to go out one by one. At first, no one noticed. A single distant system dimmed beyond the edge of human observation, its light swallowed by something too subtle to trigger alarms. Then another followed, and another. Across the galaxy, points of light flickered and vanished, like embers dying in a fire no one could see. But humanity had learned. They were watching now, always watching. The deep space arrays, expanded after the second crisis, detected the pattern long before it reached familiar territory. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It was deliberate. A slow, sweeping erasure moving through the galaxy with terrifying precision. And at the center of it, something was coming. The Lethari recognized it before the data was even complete. Their colors faded to a dim, trembling gray. It found us, their representative whispered. The room fell silent. Not confusion, not doubt, recognition. Because this was not a new threat. This was the old one. The devourer, the entity that had erased worlds and civilizations without thought, without pause, without reason. The one that had once reached Earth. And left. But it had not forgotten. It had only been waiting. Why now? A human commander asked. The Lethari's voice was quiet. Because now it understands you exist. That was the difference. Before, humanity had been invisible. Now, they were known. And something that consumed existence itself had decided to return. But this time, it was not alone. The senses struggled to process what they were seeing. The approaching distortion was vast, larger than before, deeper, heavier, more defined. And within it, movement, structures, patterns. Something had changed. The devourer had evolved. The galaxy-wide signal that humanity had once sent, the declaration that had forced it to pause, had not just reached it. It had affected it. It had learned. And now, it had adapted. It's not just consuming anymore, a scientist said, staring at the data with disbelief. It's building. The distortions within the entity were no longer chaotic. They formed networks, connections, something almost architectural in nature. It was no longer just an end. It was becoming something else. Something that used destruction as a foundation. Something that turned existence into raw material. And humanity had shown it how. The realization spread like ice through every command center on Earth. They had not stopped it. They had taught it. The panic this time was different. Less chaotic. More focused. Because humanity no longer had the luxury of fear without action. They knew what was coming. And they knew running would not save them. The council convened once more. Humans and Lethari together, standing on the edge of extinction. Again, but this time, the stakes were higher. Because the enemy had learned from them. And it would not make the same mistake twice. We cannot fight it directly, one strategist said. We've already seen what happens when we try. Then we do what we always do, another replied. We change the rules. But how do you change the rules against something that rewrites reality? That was the question, and for a long time, no one had an answer. Until the Lethari spoke. There is something we have not told you, their representative said. All eyes turned toward them. Because we did not understand it, they continued. Not fully, not until now. Attention filled the room. What is it? The human commander asked. The Lethari hesitated. Then they answered. The devourer does not destroy randomly, they said. It follows something. Follows what? The Lethari's voice dropped. Meaning. The word hung in the air. Uncertain, unbelievable, but undeniable. It seeks complexity, the Lethari explained. Civilizations, consciousness, networks of thought and connection. The more something matters, the more it is drawn to it. A human scientist frowned. You're saying it hunts importance. Yes, that doesn't make sense. It does if you think of it as growth, the Lethari replied. It does not feed on matter. It feeds on significance. The room went still, because suddenly, everything made sense. Why it had ignored empty space. Why it had consumed worlds full of life. Why it had paused when humanity spoke. Because for the first time, it had encountered something that did not just exist, but declared its existence. Something that mattered loudly enough to be noticed. And now, it was coming back for more. The realization changed everything, because it meant the battle was not just physical. It was conceptual. The devourer was not just an enemy. It was a force that responded to meaning itself. And that meant it could be influenced. Then we give it something else to follow, the commander said slowly. All eyes turned to him. We can't outgun it, he continued. We can't outrun it, but maybe, we can outthink it. The idea was simple, and completely insane. They would not try to stop the devourer. They would redirect it, create a signal so vast, so overwhelming, so significant that it would draw the entity away from Earth. A beacon, not of energy, not of power, but of meaning. The Lethari stared at them. That would require something greater than anything we have ever created, they said. The commander nodded. Then we build it. Humanity had done impossible things before. But this would be the greatest effort in their history. Every system, every network, every piece of knowledge they possessed would be combined into a single construct. A message, a presence, something that would scream into the fabric of the universe. We are here, but louder, stronger, impossible to ignore. The project was named the Beacon. And it began immediately. Earth became a forge of ideas. Scientists, engineers, philosophers, artists, thinkers of every kind came together with a single purpose. To define what humanity was. Not just biologically, not just technologically, but meaningfully. What made them matter? What made them worth noticing? The answer was not simple. It was not one thing. It was everything. Their history, their struggles, their victories, their failures, their connections, their stories. Every piece of human existence became part of the beacon. And the Lethari added their own. Their lost world, their culture, their survival, their hope. Together, they built something unprecedented. Not a weapon, not a machine, but a declaration, a living signal that represented everything they were, everything they had been, everything they could be, and at its core, a choice, because this time, humanity would not just say, we are here. They would say something more, something stronger, something dangerous. We matter. The devourer continued its advance. Stars vanished, systems collapsed, the galaxy dimmed, and the beacon grew, faster, stronger, closer to completion. But time was running out. The entity would reach the solar system within weeks. And when it did, there would be no second chance. The final stage of the beacon required something extraordinary. A focus point, a source, a consciousness to anchor it. Because meaning is not just data. It is experience. It is perspective. It is life. And that meant someone would have to become the center of it. Someone would have to connect to the beacon. Not just physically, but completely. Mind, memory, identity, merged with the signal. Forever. The volunteers came forward immediately. Thousands, millions, but only one could be chosen. Not the strongest, not the smartest, but the one who could carry it. The one who could hold all of humanity within them. The choice was not made by rank, or status, or power. It was made by something simpler. A teacher, a woman who had spent her life shaping minds, guiding others, helping people understand what it meant to be human. She was not a soldier. She was not a leader. But she understood meaning better than anyone. When they asked her if she would do it, she did not hesitate. Will it save them? She asked. We don't know, the commander replied. She nodded. Then it's worth trying. The day of activation arrived. The beacon stood ready, a network spanning the entire planet, extending into orbit, connecting every system, every mind, every piece of knowledge humanity possessed. And at its center, her, she stepped into the chamber, calm, steady, certain. Any last words? Someone asked. She smiled. Just one, she said. What is it? She looked up at the stars. Listen. The connection began. At first, it was nothing. Then everything. Her mind expanded, stretching beyond the limits of a single consciousness. Memories flooded in. Voices, lives, stories, humanity, the Lethari, all of it. She felt it, understood it, became it, and then, the beacon activated. The signal erupted into the universe. Not as sound, not as light, but as something deeper. A presence, a declaration that echoed across reality itself. We are here. The devourer reacted instantly. Its advance slowed, then stopped. For the second time in its existence. It hesitated. The beacon intensified. Stronger, brighter, louder. We matter. The entity shifted, its vast form turning, focusing, drawn to the signal like nothing before. For a moment, it seemed to struggle. As if something within it resisted. As if something remembered. Then it moved. Not toward Earth, but toward the beacon. The plan was working. The entity was being pulled away. Redirected. Saved. Relief spread across humanity. But it did not last. Because something was wrong. The beacon was not just attracting the devourer. It was affecting it, changing it. The entity's structure began to shift, its patterns reorganizing, its distortions stabilizing in ways that defied all expectations. It was not just responding. It was evolving. And the closer it got to the beacon, the more it changed. What's happening? Someone asked. The answer came from the Lethari. It's learning again, they said. The realization hit like a shockwave. The beacon was not just a lure. It was a teacher, and the devourer was paying attention. The entity reached the outer edges of the solar system. Closer, closer, drawn by the signal. But now, it was different. Not just a force of destruction. Not just a consumer of meaning. But something in between. Something becoming. The woman at the center of the beacon felt it. The connection. The awareness. For the first time, the devourer was not just observing. It was communicating. Not with words. Not with language. But with presence. With understanding. It was asking a question. And she knew the answer. She pushed the beacon further. Deeper. Opening everything. Showing it all. The beauty. The pain. The contradictions. The chaos. The meaning. What it meant to exist. What it meant to matter. The devourer stopped. Completely. Its vast form stabilizing. Its distortions settling into something almost still. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. And then, it changed. Not violently. Not suddenly. But slowly. The consuming edges softened. The destructive patterns unraveled. The entity that had once erased civilizations began to release. Stars reappeared, systems restored, fragments of what had been lost returned, imperfect but present. It was not undoing everything, but it was trying, because for the first time, it understood, not completely, not perfectly, but enough to choose something different. The beacon dimmed, the signal fading as the connection weakened. The woman at its center smiled. She could feel it, the shift, the change, the possibility. You can stop, she whispered. The devourer responded, not with destruction, not with silence, but with something new, absence of harm, a choice, and then, it left, not fleeing, not retreating, but moving on, carrying with it something it had never possessed before. Understanding. The beacon shut down, the systems powered off, the connection ended, she collapsed, but she was alive, barely, but alive. The world erupted in emotion. Not just relief, not just victory, something deeper, something impossible to describe, because they had not just survived. They had changed something fundamental. The Lethari stood beside humanity, their colors bright with something like awe. You did not defeat it, they said. No, the commander replied. We didn't. You transformed it. The commander looked at the stars. Maybe, he said, or maybe we just reminded it what existence can be. Years passed. The galaxy healed. Slowly, imperfectly, but it healed. The devourer did not return. Not as it had been. Instead, there were signs. Subtle, quiet, regions of space where anomalies stabilized instead of destroyed. Where distortions created instead of consumed. It was still out there. Still vast. Still powerful. But no longer the same. Humanity continued to grow. To explore. To connect. The Lethari became part of them. Not as refugees. But as equals. As family. And the story of the beacon became legend. A moment when everything could have ended. And didn't. Because someone chose to speak. And something chose to listen. One night, the same child, now older, stood beneath the stars once more. Do you think it remembers us? They asked. The adult beside them smiled. I think it can't forget, they said. Is that a good thing? The adult thought for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, they said. I think it is. The stars shimmered above them. Endless, full of possibility. And somewhere, far beyond sight, something moved through the darkness. Not as a destroyer, not as a monster, but as something new, something that had learned the most dangerous truth in the universe. That existence is not just about being. It is about meaning. And once you understand that, you can never go back. Humanity had faced the end. Twice, and both times, they chose to stand, not with power, not with fear, but with something far more powerful. The belief that they mattered. And in the end, that belief changed everything.